There are a lot of sneaky foods when you're at the grocery store, especially when it comes down to managing your blood glucose, when it comes down to insulin resistance. Now I'm here with Jessie Inchauspé. Now you might know her as Glucose Goddess. We're gonna jump right into this stuff. So why don't you grab one of the foods that you've got down there.
Yeah.
Or actually I'll start. You know what, I'll start.
Okay, Thomas, you start.
And we're just gonna kind of go back and forth on these foods and kind of figure out, okay, is this one a good one or is this one that we should pass on? And maybe there's some little idiosyncrasies that we should know.
Yeah, we're going to show you the things to not fall for at the grocery store.
I popped the link down below for House of Macadamia if you want to try them out too. They are where I get my macadamia nuts these days. They're all grown in South Africa. When you buy from them, you're directly supporting the farmers as well. So the farmers really do take a hit in South Africa. So by going through House of Macadamia, a lot of it goes back to working through the farmers and help support those farmers. But everything is harvested and packaged less than an hour from each other. They harvest them and then they drive them less than an hour away, package them, everything is super fresh, not going rancid, which macadamia nuts don't really go that rancid anyway. But the point is, they have macadamia nut oil, macadamia nut bars, straight up macadamia nuts with all kinds of different flavors, so really easy to add to your diet. I recommend them if you're gonna get it. You're gonna spend a fortune at the grocery store. Macadamia nuts are not the cheapest nut, but using that discount, you can save a few bucks on getting some good macadamia nuts from House of Macadamia. Plus, with any purchase using that link, a free 20-ounce bottle of cold-pressed macadamia nut oil. Literally the only cold-pressed macadamia nut oil that I know of that's on the market. And you're getting one completely free if you just use that link down below. There's no catches, it's just to get the word out there.
Let's start with this one. Let's start with oat milk.
Oh man, people love oat milk.
Yeah.
They're obsessed. And they think that it's actually a good alternative for your glucose levels because it comes from a plant, right? So that must be good. What they don't know is that actually if you look at the nutrition labels, you'll find out that this is basically starch juice, right? Because oats are a grain, and when you juice milk out of a grain, you're just extracting starch. So this is a massive, massive glucose spike in most people.
Interesting. So you're actually not, it's not like you're getting just this like nicely marinated oat milk. You're literally extracting what is actually going to spike your glucose in the
Exactly.
So people think that a lot of times it's the sugar that's added to it, which I'm sure plays a negative part, but it's actually the starch itself.
Does this one have added sugar or not even? It depends.
This one does not.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's
even if it doesn't have any
wow.
added sugar, just the amount of carbs from the oats is going to create a massive spike in your body. Because you have to think about like, where does the milk actually come from, right? If it's almond milk, for example, it comes from almonds. So you think about the composition of almonds. If it comes from oats, you have to think about what are oats? What's the composition of oats? I mean, oats are basically a starch. They have some protein in it, but it's overwhelmingly starch, right? So you're just making starch juice.
So man, that's a massive insulin spike.
So let's have a quick look at the back. So here, ingredients, oat base, water, that's basically it. You still have, per 1 cup, you have 16 grams of carbs, including 7 grams of total sugars, right? For only 3 grams of protein. So this is a big glucose spike. I'm sorry guys, I know you love oat milk so much, but you have to know the truth behind it.
That's wild. And so I grabbed this one as an alternative. Now, I mean, full disclaimer, like, for me, like I'd personally just rather have some like raw kefir, maybe a little bit of raw cream or something like that. But if we're looking at plant-based milks, I wanted to grab one that was just a little bit of a contrast, right? Because this particular one, this is
made from almonds, yeah?
Yeah, it's just straight up filtered water, organic almonds, and pink salt.
Amazing, that's what you're looking for. So what are the stats on that?
So in this we've got, 3 grams of carbs, 3 of which are fiber.
Exactly. Versus, again, let me remind you, 16 grams of carbs on this one. So actually, almond milk is a really good alternative. Coconut milk is good. Pistachio milk is now starting to become
macadamia nut milk.
Macadamia nut milk, right? So think about using nuts as the base for your milk instead of grains. Because rice milk or oat milk, that's just liquid starch.
Now, what about when we're talking like regular straight up milk? Obviously, people can have a pretty good spike from regular milk.
But it's still going to be much, much smaller than the
That's what people don't realize is they think, and especially, if you're going with a good quality, full fat milk.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the thing, we're conditioned
I have one of the graphs on my Instagram, which is full fat milk compared to skim milk. And if you take the fat out of the milk, I mean, you're just increasing the glucose spike of it, right? Because fat is protective against spikes. So if you're somebody who eats dairy easily, I mean, whole milk from good quality, I think is going to be just a better option for your glucose levels. If you want to go plant-based, pick a nut-based milk, not a grain-based milk. And then I will say also, Thomas, like if you're somebody who's just obsessed with oat milk and you can't give it up and you love it and you want it in your life, there are some things you can do to reduce the impact it's going to have on your body, right? So you can have it after breakfast instead of on an empty stomach. That'll help a lot with the spike. You can go for a little walk as you're drinking your oat milk latte. If you're not a big breakfast person, even just adding like a few almonds before you have the oat milk is going to be super helpful. So it depends. Pick your battles.
Yeah, simple little tips. Okay, then you've got some on your side, so we're going to kind of go back and forth here.
Let's talk about these, Thomas. So you got here 2 types of pasta. We have brown rice pasta and cassava flour pasta.
Yes.
Tell me about these.
Okay, so I wanted to do this because when you look at this, you look brown rice pasta, you're thinking, okay, this is a gluten-free option, it's gonna be better for me. And you know, depending on your situation, like it very well could be. But what we don't realize that this, because it's brown rice pasta, this has been pulverized and extruded into a pasta form. And once that's heated, it becomes just as high glycemic, if not more high glycemic than straight white rice.
Absolutely.
And you're really putting yourself in this cruddy situation, especially if you're adding, you know, some other things into this pasta and it just becomes a disaster, right?
Yes, I think a lot of times when you see brown pasta, you feel like, oh, this is better for me, right? Just because of the color, you have to be really cautious. The color really doesn't mean anything. It's just a different color. It doesn't have that much of an impact on what the food does to your body.
No, agreed. Yeah. And so I mentioned like, okay, having some cassava or having some, like they make lentil pasta, they make chickpea pasta. The difference can be quite monumental. Now, with cassava, just like anything, if it's heated to a certain degree, it's going to affect the starch, and it's going to be, you know, more high glycemic than if it was cooler. But in this particular case, like opting for a cassava or a lentil or a chickpea pasta is going to be a better alternative than brown rice pasta.
Yes.
It just might take a little bit of time for your digestive system to adjust, because sometimes chickpea pasta can kind of make you bloated at first, and you know, it's like pretty hard for people to break down.
Interesting. And then something I would add also when you're making pasta, like of course the type of pasta is important, but what's also important is what you're gonna have with it, right? So if you have a little salad beforehand or some veggies before you have the pasta, that's gonna help a lot your body have less of a glucose spike from the pasta. So it's the kind, but it's also, think about the rest of the meal and what you're having it with.
Agreed.
So Thomas, what would be like a really not very good thing to have with this kind of pasta?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, I definitely wouldn't have it with a soda or some juice or something where you're kind of adding on to that spike. But you know, what I would suggest is turning this into, say, like a scampi or something, right? So you get some like really good quality ghee or something. And what I usually use is ghee. Use some ghee, use some oregano, use some thyme, and then put some lean shrimp on it. Then you've got a little bit of fat, you've got a little bit of protein. Any glucose spike that would have come from this in the first place is pretty darn mitigated.
Can I add some Parmesan?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm obsessed.
Pecorino Romano would be preferred. But
okay.
Yes. Okay, so then moving on to mine. Okay, I've got your favorite, which is going to be, this is good stuff, right? It's sprouted
Right, so like if you're just walking around the aisle, you're like, oh, it's sprouted. Tell me all the good things that it says on the package.
Okay, yeah, it's gluten-free. It's sprouted, which means that they've sprouted the grains already.
Be good for you.
So it's quinoa, it's cacao. I've got antioxidants from the cacao.
Amazing.
It's lightly sweetened. Yeah, it seems like a good mix and something I'd give my kids. You know, it's like you look through the store.
And this again, this really pisses me off because the marketing on this package is trying to tell you this is really good for you. It's a super health choice. But if you don't look at the ingredients label, you might be completely fooled by these lies. So now, turn it around and tell me the actual ingredients in it.
Sprouted gluten-free organic oats. All right, we're off to a decent start, but still oats. But then second, we've got organic cane sugar.
Boom! So that's super freaking important. Look at the ingredients. If there's sugar of any kind in the first 5 ingredients, it's basically dessert. It's not a good, like, healthy breakfast choice that'll keep your glucose level steady.
No, even though this might not be the best montage of different ingredients, if someone was like, okay, I can't live without my granola, what would be a solution? Maybe with some yogurt or something like that?
Exactly. So some nice full-fat yogurt. My favorite is Greek yogurt. So you could have that. Maybe you add even more protein to it. So maybe you put like a little bit of almonds in there, some nut butter, maybe you have a little egg beforehand.
Like protein powder in your yogurt?
You could do that, yeah. This is essentially just sugar and starches, right? And so in the morning, you want to avoid having just sugars and starches because that will create a big glucose spike. You need to add some protein into that because otherwise, you're just gonna be on this cravings roller coaster all day. You'll have this for breakfast, 2 hours later, you're hungry, you have some more starches and sugars, and then all day you're just like addicted. And you're on this addiction train that most of us really try to get off. And so fixing your breakfast is the first place to start. If you want to get off the addiction roller coaster.
Okay, what do we have next over on your side?
Okay, my dear. I want you to tell me about this, because I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, okay, so this is buckwheat flour, and it's really interesting. People don't always know about buckwheat flour. It is technically what is called a pseudo cereal. Okay, so you get all the effects of being able to utilize a cereal grain without as much of the starch, and it's technically in a similar fashion to quinoa. Quinoa is not technically a cereal, but it is a pseudo-cereal in the sense that it's used like a cereal grain a lot. Okay, so a gluten-free option that is relatively low glycemic. Now, again, the devil is in the details, like how you prepare it, right? If you mix this up with a bunch of sugar and you bake a cake with it, like it's not going to be the same. But if we look at this, it's a decent amount of fiber when you actually look at a 1/4 cup serving when it comes down to an actual flour. Now, it's not like an almond flour, but the reason that I like this more than an almond flour is simply because of caloric density too.
Okay.
I try to look at this whole equation. I say, wait a minute, if we use almond flour, we've got like 250 calories in a pretty small serving. You make some almond flour cookies, they're not going to spike your glucose, but they might be very calorically dense. So how do we find this balance of people that are trying to watch their glucose but also watching calories? And that's where things like buckwheat comes in. It's pretty low fat, but it's also still has 3 grams of fiber in it in a simple 1/4 cup serving, which doesn't sound like a ton, but considering it's a lower glycemic to begin with, and it's not going to have all these starches in it.
You know, that's interesting because on the calories thing, like my inclination would be actually to go with the almond flour, because even though it has more calories in it, it might keep your glucose levels steadier. So avoid, that dip afterwards that might create the cravings. So it's always an interesting equation you have to make in your head. You're like, I need to add calories. For example, the granola, right, that we just did before. Like you want to add full fat yogurt to that meal to reduce the spike, but by adding the full fat yogurt, you're adding food, you're adding calories. So you have to figure out like what are good calories to add, like protein, fat, and fiber, and what are bad calories to add, like you said, like soda, right? So you have to always sort of make that balance in your head.
Balance it out entirely. And the cool thing is like what we do in our house a lot of times is we will mix different flours, because you're not going to find, or you're going to spend an arm and a leg if you try mixing, buying these specific like chef blends. But in reality, like you could take, okay, let's say the almond flour doesn't give you the volume that you want when you're baking something. Okay, you mix a little buckwheat, you mix a little, hazelnut flour and a little bit of almond flour.
So what would you bake with this?
So I mean, if this was going to be something that's usually going to be
What are you going to make me this afternoon, basically, is what I'm asking.
You don't want me to make anything, trust me. So, with this, we're typically looking like if we're making like a pizza type thing. Okay, so if we're making like a flatbread. This doesn't really work well if you want a lot of leavening in particular, but it's just a better option than like brown rice flour. And so if people are really looking for like a 1-to-1 type flour, then this is a good choice. But yeah, I agree, using an almond flour. I've become a big fan of hazelnut flour.
What? I've never tried that.
Yeah, because hazelnut flour, just fun fact, like hazelnuts have the highest amount of soluble fiber of any nut. Okay, so when you're looking at impact on blood glucose, but also just digestive health and gut microbiome, almonds are great, but hazelnuts, you're going to get that extra soluble fiber.
Interesting. Like the difference is significant.
Pretty significant.
Oh, cool. I did not know that. Thank you, Thomas.
Okay, what do we got next? So on my end, okay, this is going to be interesting. Well, let's talk about kind of the elephant in the room. You and I have both talked probably ad nauseum about apple cider vinegar on Instagram, on YouTube. People probably know us as those people. So I grabbed this, and then I almost grabbed this by mistake. And I just want you to kind of explain the difference here, because this is pretty glaring.
Yes, and this upsets me a lot. So let's compare. So here you have a regular apple cider vinegar bottle, right? If you look in the ingredients, it says organic apple cider vinegar, water. So this, when you have 1 tablespoon of this before a meal, will help reduce the glucose spike. And so if you're buying vinegar for the first time because you want to try this glucose hack, you might see these next to each other and be like, ooh, this one looks cool. It says prebiotic and it's got some ginger in it and some honey. This is probably good, right? This will not have the same effect at all on your body as this, because this is actually not vinegar. This is basically just like a sweetened drink with a little bit of vinegar in it. When you look at the ingredients, it says water, organic apple cider vinegar, organic honey. A lot of honey in this actually. In 1 serving, you have 9 grams of sugar. So if you have this, it will not help your glucose levels, even though there is some vinegar in it. It will actually give you a big glucose spike and do the opposite of what you want it to do. So, and I find this a little bit annoying because, they're using the apple cider vinegar sort of health halo to make you think this is going to be good for your health, when actually this is helpful. This is dessert. This is candy. This is, a little sweet thing you want to drink. This is not something to have every single day. So always look and make sure you're just getting vinegar, not a vinegar-ish drink with a bunch of sugar in it.
I think it's something to add with honey. I mean, it's honey. The antimicrobial, antibacterial benefits you get from honey, first of all, you can get from a tiny, tiny, tiny amount. People think they need to have this massive amount. So if you are saying, okay, hey, I really want honey for specific benefits, it's important to note, like, Manuka honey is really the only honey that you're really going to extract some solid benefits from, and even at that, you need a teaspoon, not however much is in this. So if you wanted to have honey, it's like mix it with a little fruit.
And also, I'm going to tell you something that's going to blow your mind. So people often think like, okay, honey has antioxidants in it, so that's why they'll have it. So there are as many antioxidants in a teaspoon of honey as there are in half a blueberry.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, like, make sure when you're eating honey, you don't do it thinking it's beneficial for you. Like, it's really dessert. It's sugar, right? It's just marketed, packaged differently than regular sugar. But even, you know, we could have looked today at like cane sugar versus coconut sugar versus brown sugar. It's all the same. Like, pick the one that you like.
Yeah, the marketing on the coconut sugar always gets me, because even though we don't have coconut sugar here, it says low glycemic. In reality, all it is marginally lower glycemic than refined. So they can claim it's low glycemic just by contrast to refined cane sugar, but it's still only a couple of points, and it's negligible. It's totally negligible.
And actually, the coconut sugar thing about it being lower glycemic, apparently the Philippines, which is a big exporter of coconut sugar, were the ones that produced that report showing it's lower glycemic. Then it was tested by this Australian agency that actually like looks at glycemic levels, you know, worldwide, and they found no difference between coconut sugar and real sugar. So you know, be careful.
It's all one and the same. And last note on the honey piece. People want the benefits of honey. Go with bee pollen. That way you're getting like just a couple grams of carbs, and the benefits are in the bee pollen. The benefit, the antimicrobial effects, the propolis, things like that. Yeah, so you want to go for that.
Amazing.
Okay, what have you got on your side next?
I've got,
Okay, yeah, so this is a perfect example, a prime example of the whole calorie equation, right? So you could say, like, rice cakes, there's 90 calories in a cake, and these are actually sweetened, so it's not even the perfect example. But if you get like straight up regular puffed rice cakes, if you were just purely counting calories, you'd say, oh, there's only 50 calories in them. It's a great way to fill myself up. It is as high of a spike as you could possibly get. I mean, it's the glycemic index scale, like when you look at puffed rice, is like straight up 100. Yeah,
we can show the little graph of me testing the rice cake on my glucose level. It's like,
yeah, so it's like if you've got a starch chain, like in this rice, okay, this is the glucose molecules. They're all bound together. And then what happens when they puff rice, like with Rice Krispies or with simply puffed rice or rice cakes, they're injecting air, right, to puff the rice. So you've got these glucose molecules that are bound together in specific starch chains depending on what starch it is. But when you inject the air in them, poof, those glucose molecules now become separated. So you used to have these bonds that you would need amylase and you would need these other enzymes to actually break apart.
And time.
In time, yes. Okay, now you've got this where there are no more bonds. So you've got straight pure glucose that the body can just assimilate.
And interestingly, it's the same number of molecules, right? But what matters is actually how quickly those molecules are getting to your bloodstream and how rapidly they're going to increase the glucose concentration in your blood. So you might think it's the same number of calories, same number of glucose molecules, but you know, their form and what's actually going on inside the food and how quickly they get broken down is really important to talk about. Maybe on that note, let me continue this. Thomas, what is this?
So it's a very similar discussion, right? So we've got a regular potato or a gold potato, but it would be the same case with any kind of white fleshed potato. And then you've got a sweet potato, okay? Now, contrary to popular belief, okay, well, first, spoiler alert, like the sweet potato is going to be better. Okay, the sweet potato, because it contains a lot more in the way of nutritional value. Like if you were looking gram for gram, fiber for fiber, antioxidant for antioxidant, like
I guess she wins.
Yes, she wins.
Okay.
But when it comes down to the glycemic scale, when you actually heat these up to the same temperature, a lot of times people would be disappointed. Like it's not that much of a difference, right? Because the fiber content, yes, there's a little bit of fiber in the sweet potato, but it's not as much as people think.
Yeah, there's a bit more sugar in the sweet potato too.
There is, yes. And what makes the sweet potato different is there is an impact as far as what are called anthocyanins, the specific polyphenols and antioxidants that are in sweet potatoes. So those do directly have an impact on alpha amylase. They have an impact on how we break that stuff down. So that makes the sweet potato a marginal winner, okay? Now, where the sweet potato begins to shine more is if you were to let these cool down a little bit. So in the same way that these guys were a little bit sketchy, potatoes can be a little bit sketchy because again, we've got those starch molecules, but what happens when you heat something? You've got the starch molecules and these glucose molecules are bound together in a starch chain, right? Yeah, you heat something, it vibrates until it expands. You've done the same thing with that baked potato, you've done the same thing with that sweet potato. But when you let these cool down to even room temperature, it changes the glycemic index scale. And this one, the sweet potato, starts to get a little bit better at a faster rate because there's already a good degree of resistant starch, RS1 starch, in the sweet potato to begin with. So the sweet potato is definitely going to be your winner, but regardless of whether it's a regular potato or a sweet potato, as much as you want to burn the heck out of the inside of your mouth eating it scalding hot, try to let it cool down. And if you really want to be a freak and you really want to, you can actually put it in the fridge and let it cool down to beyond room temperature.
I have two questions.
Yes.
One, can you remind people what resistant starch is? And two, if we ate this raw, what would be the impact?
So if you ate that potato raw, first of all,
Should I do it?
I mean, you might get a little bit of a bloating, some stomachache. Crunch.
It's like an apple.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not going to taste good. I mean, it's talk about so yeah, it's going to take a while for your body to break that down into a usable fuel. And in fact, some of the sugars aren't even going to be digestible because you have different forms of resistant starch. You have RS1, RS2, RS3. So you have forms that are already existing where they already take a long time for your body to break down. Okay, and by a resistant starch, it means it's resistant to the breakdown in the human body. Okay, so we now rely on fermentation, on the actual bacteria within our gut to break those fibers down, which is tremendous for the gut microbiome. It's tremendous for our glucose. There's a lot of huge benefits to it. Okay, then there are what is called a retrograded starch. A retrograded starch is where you have heated a starch and then cooled it, so just like the name implies, retrograded, it retroactively cools into a resistant starch. So by heating a potato, you make it edible, and then by cooling it, you're making it edible and more of a resistant starch. So when you get into the nuancy details of resistant starch, it's very complicated. You have all kinds of different forms, and your microbiome is different than my microbiome, and how I respond to a resistant starch is going to be different than how you respond. But one thing that is pretty darn clear in the research is that it's infinitely better than just eating it when it's not there. So you're getting a huge effect on the microbiome, which people don't always realize either, that when the microbiome is flourishing and you have a lot of bacteria that is being fed properly by resistant starch, it's fuel for the microbiome. And then you produce these short chain fatty acids, which are a direct result of essentially our bacteria digesting things. Okay, and these short chain fatty acids act as signaling devices that communicate with our cells and increase glucose uptake. They improve glucose transport, they improve glucose tolerance, they also improve fatty acid utilization as well. So at a very systemic level, you are actually changing the body. So there's a short-term benefit of resistant starch and a long-term benefit.
And if you don't have the time to cool things down, another thing you can do before eating any starches is just having some vegetables prior to that. So you're increasing the fiber content in your, in your stomach, and then that fiber arriving before the starches is going to create a protective mesh that's going to prevent your body from absorbing too many of the glucose molecules too quickly. So lots of different hacks, right? If you do all of them, it's even better. But there's always other things you can do.
Absolutely. All right.
Love it.
So now I've got some other ones. Okay, so this is one that you were. You kind of looked at it like, okay, why is this here? But I wanted to grab this one. This is marinara.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you think, what's wrong with tomato sauce? I want you to look at the label on that.
Okay. It does look pretty innocent. It says wholesome ingredients, non-GMO. Yeah, so ingredients we have diced tomatoes in tomato juice, and then we have tomato puree, and then we have cane sugar. So all of these, actually, I want to say something about. So diced tomatoes, okay, those are whole tomatoes, in tomato juice. So tomato juice has been made by extracting, essentially, all the liquid out of tomatoes. And tomatoes, contain some sugar, and when you juice them, you're removing all the protective fiber in them, and you're creating, essentially, just some sugary water. Then, tomato puree. Again, tomato puree is a tomato that's been denatured, right? And that's been concentrated. When you puree something, usually you evaporate some of the water. So the sugar gets even more condensed. And then cane sugar. I mean, obviously, the fact that there's cane sugar in this sauce means it's not going to be helpful to add to your meal. It's going to be a big glucose spike waiting to happen. And in fact, if you look at it, per serving, 10 grams of carbs, 7 grams of sugar, including 2 grams of added sugars.
So it's really interesting. I kind of learned something there. I mean, I knew that any kind of processing can alter the natural makeup of a food. You look at this, that's only a half a cup serving.
Yes.
So it's a half a cup serving, and it's so innocent.
And I would have the whole, I would have half the bottle.
Least, right? Yeah, and you think, okay, this is going to be great because it's, it's got 7 grams of sugar, but only 2 grams of added sugar. So no, the point there is the reason there's 7 grams of sugar and only 2 of which is added is because that sugar has been concentrated so much. Yes. Basically, even though it's not added, it should almost just say concentrated concentrated, because that's really what it is.
Yes, and you know, the fact that sugar has been added or not added, your body doesn't make the difference. Your body's not like, oh, this is the added sugar and this is the non-added sugar, therefore I'm going to process them differently, right? Your body just processes those molecules exactly the same. So really, we don't care if it's been added or not. As long as it's there, that's what matters. And actually, on that topic, can we go to the banana next? Because I want to talk about that.
Well, we got two kinds of bananas here. I've got like a beautiful, like starting to turn brown, like really ripe yellow banana, and then I've got this like lime green banana.
So first, I want to tell you something that might be a bit shocking. So when you walk around the grocery store and you see this, you might be like, oh, this is cool, this is a plant, this is natural, you know, it comes from a tree, like this is from nature. Turns out, these bananas are not natural at all. So all the fruit that you find in supermarkets today looks nothing like nature intended it to be many millions of years ago when it first created it. Bananas have been bred by humans, a little bit like humans bred gray wolves into chihuahuas, you know, for entertainment. Bananas have been bred from ancestral bananas, which were actually tiny, full of seeds, full of fiber, not very sweet, into these, you know, very sweet, very juicy pieces of fruit to please our senses, because humans love the taste of sweetness, right? It releases dopamine in our brain. So humans have created fruit. Any piece of fruit you see in the supermarket, from oranges to pineapples, everything has been bred to be extra sweet, extra juicy. So you have to know that fruit is not natural. However, I always say that if you want to eat something sweet, a piece of whole fruit is always the best option for what to eat.
So eat the peel too?
Huh?
So eat the peel too?
You know, actually, you could. I once got a DM on Instagram. Somebody asked me if I eat the peel on the banana, will it reduce the spike? I mean, it would, right? Because that's most of the fiber. So if you want to eat something sweet, piece of whole fruit is a good idea because whole fruit contains fiber. Okay, and the fiber is protective against glucose spikes. It helps your body reduce the spike that the sugar in the fruit would create. So that's one important thing to remember. Second, let's talk about the colors. Okay, Thomas, tell me the difference.
Well, one's green.
Okay, but why do I care?
Okay, so with a green banana, it's not ripe, and you think, well, yeah, that's no fun. I don't want to eat that. It's not going to be very sweet.
Yeah.
Well, you're already halfway there, right? So remember the resistant starches we talked about.
Yes.
Okay, when a banana is ripe, it is because there is a level of fermentation that is happening at a very small scale within the actual structure of the banana. So that means that as it's fermenting, these molecules are changing and it's becoming sweeter and it's becoming sugar. In this case, if you were to eat that green banana, it might not taste amazing. I actually quite like the taste of them now because I've kind of grown accustomed to it.
But in a smoothie, you wouldn't even tell.
You would never notice it. And I also encourage people to do it like, treat it like a supplement, less like a food. So take that banana and cut it into, you know, little slices. So you've got little 50-cent piece, like things like that. And then, you know, you eat 4 or 5 of them and you build your tolerance up. Because when you first start, you might get bloated. And you're like, why am I getting bloated? What's up with this green banana? Well, that initial bloating, that's exactly what is happening inside this banana when it's fermenting. It says it's fermenting in your gut. And it's feeding lactobacilli. It's feeding these butyrate producing bacteria, which are so, I cannot overemphasize how potent these are when it comes down to overall metabolic health, like that lactobacilli, that Bacteroidetes, things like that, really good bacteria. So the green, even though this is genetically modified and completely altered, and it's probably not the best thing you could choose. Like if you go to Hawaii, sometimes you see those little teeny bananas, that's closer, even those are affected, but that's closer, right?
To ancestral bananas, but still, I mean.
Yeah, it's still, they're still affected. So either way, you're at least getting this. Now, if you look at plantains people think are synonymous with bananas. Of course, plantains have been altered as well, but plantains, just in their fully ripe nature, are a little bit lower glycemic than bananas, but you can palate green plantain a little better than you can palate green banana.
I love this concept of I want the fermentation to happen, you know, in my body rather than in the banana peel. It's like I want that. I want what she got. I want that in my body. I love it.
Exactly, right?
So on that topic, can you tell us a little bit about berries?
Yeah, let's talk berries for a second. So when we come back to the whole fruit thing, we have to remember that even these berries, even organic berries, are going to be different than what they were millions of years ago. People think, oh, it's organic. Well, we still have very, very, very smart people. Very smart people that are doing selective breeding. And all the organic...
Gray wolves to chihuahuas. Think about that. Like that happened to every single piece of fruit on the planet.
Exactly. Genetically modified just means that they're actually altering the genes in a different way.
In a lab.
You can essentially still have modification and selective breeding.
Selective breeding,
to make very, very sweet so that every single strawberry is perfectly sweet.
And
like
red, right?
Yeah.
Like all those things. And quite huge, actually. This is not what strawberries look like in nature. Like if you see wild strawberries, they're tiny. They're like this big, super baby little berries.
Have you ever tested, so what, my wife always makes fun of me because what I do, when I eat a strawberry, I actually eat the whole thing.
Okay, I'll try, hold on.
I don't care. I'll get the green. I actually think it adds a nice bite to it. And you're adding like a couple.
Do you eat the kiwi peel?
No, but I might, if you tell me it's good.
Okay, like it's not bad, but like
Well, I'm not doing it for taste. I'm doing it for function. So, and the more green that's on it, I'm like, all I'm doing, okay, now there's no concrete data to back this up. Those that watch my channel know that I really try to talk about things that have some data to back it up. I can't promise you that eating this green part is going to reduce the spike, but I can imagine mechanically it probably is a smidget. But either way, strawberries are one of the most like benign fruits that you could eat, especially when they're in organic form. There's a lot of, like, look at this. Well, that's a very ripe one. There's a lot of meat in there, a lot of fiber in there.
A lot of water.
A lot of water. So, you know, I can't remember the exact detail, but it's like a cup of strawberries is still like less than 10 grams of carbs usually.
Grab that little guy over there. Because something you can do when you're eating fruit, if you're concerned about the spike and you want to reduce its effect on your body, is just add what I call clothes to your carbs. So carbs are starches or sugars, right? So fruit are sugars. And clothing are proteins, fat, and fiber. And if you add those to a piece of fruit, you're reducing the spike. So this is a really good example, right, of something you could add to a piece of fruit to reduce its spike.
You know what's kind of cool too? Is you could literally take heavy cream, whip it up with you don't even need to add a sweetener to it. If you wanted to add a sweetener, you can maybe do a little stevia or monk fruit. But realistically, just heavy cream whipped up just naturally with nothing, no sweetener, and some fruit. Tastes delicious too. In
my new book, I have a recipe, a breakfast recipe, which is called Ice Cream for Breakfast. And it's protein powder, Greek yogurt, and berries. And you mix those together, you put them in the freezer, and it's really, really good.
Ooh, nice. Yeah. Oh, by the way, we're going to link out to her book down below. Yeah. What is your book called?
My new book is called The Glucose Goddess Method. Okay. And it's essentially 4 weeks, your fast track to steady glucose.
Nice.
Because I have all these hacks, you know, that I share based on scientific studies. And people always ask me, okay, how do I start? Like, which hack do I start with? Help me with the recipes, hold my hand day by day. And so this book is like, just lean back, relax, follow my lead, and I'll lead you to a life of steady glucose.
Ooh, nice. Okay, well, definitely going to link that out. That's going to be down below in the description. So another thing I'll add is, believe it or not, they were out of raspberries at the store, but I wanted to mention raspberries because raspberries are specifically unique because they have what are called tannins in them. Now, tannins are cool, and we'll come back to the blueberries in a second, but tannins are unique because tannins are legitimately an alpha amylase inhibitor. Okay, so
really?
Yeah, so the same kind of thing. I didn't even buy them for this reason, but I consistently sip on tea throughout the day. I love tea.
I love tea too.
And in the afternoon, I switch to a decaf black tea. And people are like, why do you switch to either a decaf green or black? I'm like, well, for me, I just like the taste of it, period. But secondly, like those tannins are very beneficial. Like they do inhibit the enzyme activity. But raspberries are unique because they naturally contain those that enzyme inhibitor to begin with. So I always tell people if they're doing a ketogenic diet, like when they could literally have like a cup of raspberries and they don't even get knocked out of ketosis, meaning they're not even having enough of a carb impact.
Because of the alpha amylase inhibition. I mean, acetic acid also works on alpha amylase. Like alpha amylase, she's our girl, you know, that's what we modulate to reduce the spike.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of cool. And then I mentioned, I put blueberries in there. Now blueberries, fun fact, there is a huge delta between organic, non-organic, and wild blueberries, just so that people know.
Okay. What are these?
Now, those are, I think those are just regular organic, right?
Just regular.
Yeah.
Not even organic, just regular.
Just regular. Now, and this was deceiving because I was buying them fast and I was like, oh, green label.
Green label.
That's called greenwashing, right? Like, our brain is just like, but anyway, if you go for the little teeny blueberries, like you usually find them in the frozen section because they're wild. And don't be afraid of frozen blueberries, like just FYI.
Frozen anything,
like a lot of times maintains the antioxidant profile better because they're frozen right after being picked. The cool thing is wild blueberries have about half the sugar of those. So, I don't know if this is gonna work. Well, it would help if you, okay.
We tried.
Anyway, so yeah, I'm a big blueberry fan.
Nice.
Now, added benefits.
Wow, these are really sweet.
The anthocyanins, super good for the brain.
Don't you feel like those taste a bit weird?
Those are extra sweet, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely been bred from gray wolves into chihuahuas to be extra sweet, extra juicy. Seriously.
All right.
What do we have next?
You're making a good choice. It's Skinny Pop, right?
Skinny Pop.
Like 100 calories a bag. It's non-GMO.
Thomas, you got some blueberry on your lip.
So, I mean, what's the deal with this? Like, what's so bad? What's so bad about this? I mean, this particular one, popcorn, sunflower oil, and salt.
Yeah.
I mean, seems pretty simple.
I mean, skinny, right? I guess if it says skinny on the packaging, it's probably good for you. Well, do you remember the rice cakes that we just talked about? Thomas, tell us why these are similar.
Well, you've got a corn kernel, and guess what? Pop, right? So same kind of thing. So you're looking at that same concept. Now, the good news is with bagged popcorn, I can't believe I'm saying this, but when it's bagged, it has had a chance to cool a little bit.
Oh, smart.
So it does retrograde a tiny bit.
Yeah.
So if you were to air pop popcorn and eat it hot and fresh,
yeah.
It's going to be worse than that. I think there's a lot of better options than that. This may not be the worst possible thing. It at least has a little bit of, you know, fat in there to kind of like mitigate it a tiny bit. But the reason that I wanted to bring that up is like, okay, why don't we give it a comparison? Like something, if you really just want to pop a snack. This particular, I have no fiduciary obligation to say this to this brand. I discovered them and I really like them.
Yeah.
Like this is pretty much a seed little snack disc. Okay, in this case we have 81% seeds, white sesame seed, linseeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, balsamic vinegar.
That's good.
Now even this one, okay, balsamic vinegar powder, it's got psyllium husk, it's got high oleic sunflower oil, which, you know, we go back and forth on.
What are the grams of fiber on that?
So 5.
Yeah. 5
for 6 crackers.
Yeah. And here we have this whole package, only 2 grams of fiber, the whole package.
Yeah, these. So I just wanted to be able to tell people like, okay, if you like something that you can just pop really quick, like, you know, it's oftentimes better to just opt for something like this. Even though the caloric density is a little bit higher, 6 crackers is 110 calories. We're so conditioned to just look at those calories.
We are.
But clearly,
this is 100 calories, and this is what? 110. So you might think, oh, that's worse because it has more calories.
And there's 6 servings in this, so you're 660 calories for this whole box.
Yeah.
But clearly, conditioning people to look at calories only is not
working. And by the way,
working.
it's the biggest number because that's what the food companies want you to look at, because then if they just focus on the calories, and they can make all kinds of weird, you know, things to reduce that big number of calories by adding specific ingredients into it. And if you just look at the number of calories, you might think it's better for you. But actually, you have to think about the molecules inside the food. You know, you have to think about what the food is actually going to do to your biochemistry. And you said something, you said if you're looking for something to just like pop as a snack, this made me think of these guys. So grapes. You call them raisins or grapes? Grapes, right?
Grapes.
Raisins is when they're dried, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so you might buy some grapes and just like eat mindlessly, maybe 40 or 50 of them, just whatever. This again is a perfect example of that selective breeding we were talking about. So this is a Chihuahua, guys. This is mega Chihuahua. This is not a natural, you know, fruit that was in nature millions of years ago. These are little sugar bombs that humans created to be really delicious, but this is dessert, you know? It's really just huge amounts of sugar in each of these little, what do you call them? Balls?
Something like that.
Grains? What do you call grains of raisins? Grains.
No, I mean, I don't know what you call
they're
them.
super
Just
good.
grapes.
Grapes. They're super good, right? But you have to remember, like, this has been bred to be extra sweet, extra juicy. So remember, if you can, to not have this on an empty stomach. As dessert after a meal is going to be better. Put some clothing on that. And ideally, you know, I would pick maybe the crackers that Thomas you just showed. Or have a mix, right? If you really love grapes, have some grapes and some crackers instead of just pure grapes.
Yeah, just you have
But
to
it's super tasty. Like, it's so good.
Okay, what else have you got on your side before we some more?
Okay, I got some more stuff for you. I got this guy.
All right, so I just mentioned this because when we talk about the gut biome, people are like, okay, I'm gonna have, what can I do that's something that I can like sip on, something that I can do that's gonna have a huge, like a good benefit as far as my appetite. Kefir is a very interesting thing because a huge probiotic effect. You're looking at, when you look at the world of dairy, because this is already starting to ferment and it's kind of got the fermented process here, it says it's got 12 grams of carbs and you're like 12 grams of sugar, but it's also got 8 grams of protein, and that's for an entire cup of this stuff. So I want to tell you something about kefir. The impact you get on your microbiome from kefir is one of the most well-documented like changes that you can have in your microbiome.
Really?
So you can eat sauerkraut, you can eat kefir, or you can eat kimchi, sour, things like that. And those might have a negligible benefit, but when you look at the research, like kefir is very, very potent. And you don't need to be drinking a cup of this stuff. In fact, drinking a cup of this would be quite rank. Like that's pretty potent. So usually for me, it's like 3 or 4 tablespoons. It's like something you just have
a bit like your green banana that uses supplements.
Exactly.
You like supplement with these little power foods.
Precisely. So this is something, because of the fat profile, because of the protein, and because of the probiotic effect, it's a really good thing to add alongside some fruit. So it's like if you were having fruit, I'm gonna have fruit with a little little bit of kefir and just kind of pound it like a shot. And it adds some close, if you want to call it that, to your fruit, but you're also getting additional benefits.
I love it. Okay, I got a few more things for you.
All right, I mentioned this because I think most people can tell you that teriyaki sauce is sweet and they probably know that there's sugar in it, but something happens in our brains with sauces. It's like we grant them this amnesty that they shouldn't be granted because it's a sauce and it can't really add up that much. Well, I just wanted to use this for context because this has 6 grams of carbs, 5 grams of sugars, 5 of which are added, so they're all added, but that's in 1 tablespoon. Oof. 1 tablespoon.
That's like eating just a tablespoon of sugar, essentially.
It pretty much is. So, I mean, not a whole lot to say on this other than the fact that you really need to be careful with the sauces.
And also, I think something that happens is like, if I gave you a tablespoon of just cane sugar with some water, you would not be able to really drink more than 1 tablespoon. But because this also has salt in it, your brain is like, ooh, this is kind of tasty, sweet and salty, much easier to drink. Okay. Uh-oh. Oatmeal. Let's talk about oatmeal, Thomas. One thing that I hear a lot, so oatmeal is something that's recommended for people with diabetes, you know, by big organizations to help with your glucose levels. And oatmeal, you might think, oh, you know, we talked about oat milk, but oatmeal itself, you might think, oh, it has a lot of protein in it. You know, sometimes it says like, well, it doesn't say much on this packet, but sometimes you'll see like high fiber, you know, good for your heart, etc. This is just a grain, this is just starches. Yes, it has some protein in it, but it's not a good way to get protein in if you want protein for breakfast. Really, really not.
It's not, and it's interesting because when you break down different components of the oatmeal, you'd be able to isolate 1 or 2 variables that are good for you and easy to take those to the bank, right? There's soluble fiber in oatmeal.
Sure.
Okay, well, if you lean into that as your marketing angle, it's gonna make it sound like it's gonna save the world, right?
Also, it says whole grain. You might think, oh, whole grain. That's great, right? That's better than normal grain. Well, not really, it doesn't make a big difference.
Well, the reason I grabbed this one is because it's so interesting because, first of all, straight up oatmeal is going to be better than oatmeal with these added flavorings and sugars.
It has
okay,
apple,
that's
cinnamon,
like a simple one.
Maple and brown sugar, cinnamon spice.
In fact, I remember there was a study a while back, I remember looking at that. It was quite alarming, like the difference between, also with instant oatmeal, it's significantly different because when they make instant oatmeal, they pulverize it quite a bit and it already changes the molecular structure.
Hold on, I'm so shocked. So in each of these little servings, there's 11 grams or 12 grams of added sugar and overall 30 grams of carbs, right? And in terms of protein, you have 4 grams of protein in this. This is not a good way to get protein in the morning at all. If you want to have protein, have some eggs, have some leftover chicken from dinner, like have actual protein-rich foods. This is just a big glucose spike waiting to happen. These are sugars and starches. I mean, it's just,
If you absolutely love oatmeal, I've got 2 solutions. One, don't get instant oatmeal. Okay, step 1. Okay, get whole oatmeal, do it the hard way.
How
Nothing
about the
in life
steel cut and
that's better, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but what I would suggest is add a couple tablespoons of chia.
Yeah.
Okay, that's gonna make it taste better anyway. Add a little bit of, well in this
flaxseed.
case, I've got flaxseed, right?
You need to grind that
up. You need to
up?
grind it. You do need to grind it, and FYI, not that I want to make it hard for everybody, but to get the best benefit, you need to grind it fresh and then use it. So just use your coffee grinder. But you know what? How important is your health to you? Really, seriously. And if you really want oatmeal that bad, you better work for it. That's what's going to happen. So putting a couple tablespoons of flax, a couple tablespoons of chia with your oatmeal will dramatically change it up. Now,
I also love adding some nuts to it.
Nuts is great too, yeah.
A few hazelnuts. Now you told me they were really good, so I would add like 10 hazelnuts in there.
And if you, again, with oatmeal, if you let it cool, it becomes a resistant starch, okay? So if you don't mind having cool oatmeal, and you can manually cool it a little bit, put a little bit of whole milk in it, put it in the fridge for a few minutes, and it actually tastes quite good.
Okay, question. If you're supposed to grind the flax seeds instantly, do you grind the flax seeds after your oatmeal is cooled and then you're ready to eat it?
I would do that. I would do that. But
so you don't grind the flax seeds before you do the whole cooling process?
I mean, it's probably a negligible difference. Like, it's not a matter of minutes, it's usually a matter of hours that the flax seed starts to oxidize. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, but if you have the luxury of being able to grind them like right when you're about to eat it, that's always gonna be best.
Another thing I would say, like if you love oatmeal, just have a little 2-egg omelet before you eat some oatmeal. Like that would also help a lot your blood sugar levels. You know, have some protein, fat, or fiber before having this. Think about oatmeal almost like breakfast dessert.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, with that, I think we've gone through all of it. So, Jessie, where can everyone find you?
Listen, my Instagram is @glucosegoddess, and my new book, The Glucose Goddess Method, is out. And it kind of helps you like see through all this marketing crap and just gives you a very straight, easy path to steady your glucose levels. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of Grocery Shopping with Thomas and Jessie.
And I'll see you guys tomorrow.